discovered that there are these 8 key drivers that drive the sellability of a company. The first one's an easy one. It's easy to understand. It's actually very difficult to deliver. It's your financial performance, right? So it's made up of what's your top line revenue, what's your bottom line profit. And the interesting thing about financial performance is there's a second kind of hidden element to it. It's not only what those numbers are, but the quality of the reporting of those numbers. So to drive up your score, not only focus on your top line or your bottom line, but also consider investing in an audit or some way to make sure that those numbers are as defendable as you can. Because a buyer's going to come in and say, great, you've got these numbers, but how defendable are they? And what third party has come in to really scrutinize these? So investing in an audit is one simple way to improve your score on financial performance. You know, the second driver of sellability is growth potential. So a lot of business owners, when they think about their business, they want it valued on what they've done in the past, right? We're proud of what we've done in the past. That's normal. You know, the fact that you've won an association award, for example, or that you've got a 20-year business, or that you're recognized for your reliability, whatever it is that you think you've done in the past. And the hard truth of it is that when a buyer comes in, they're not buying the past. They're not buying what you've done. They're really only buying one thing, and that is they're buying your future stream of profits. What is this business going to do in the future? For you, it's the end of the game. It's the finishing line. For them, it's the start. It's a different frame of mind. So for them, they want to understand, okay, what can this business do in the future? So to drive up your score on growth potential, you really want to make the case and focus on what is the future potential of this business. You know, can it operate in a different market? Let's say you've been successful in market A. Is it possible to scale this into market B, C, and D? Could you cross-sell additional products and services to your existing customer base? Are there ways that this could work in different cultural markets, for example? All the ways that you could significantly scale up the business. The answer to those questions is going to drive up your growth potential. The Switzerland structure gets its name from the country of Switzerland. So if you know anything about the history of Switzerland, it's pretty amazing. You know, they've taken this obsession with being independent. You know, they didn't join either of the 2 world wars. They didn't send troops to Iraq. They didn't even join the United Nations, if you can believe this, before a referendum for the entire country to decide whether to join or not. They ultimately did. But it really goes to the idea that as a country, they're obsessed with this independence, not being overly dependent on any one faction or regime, so to speak. That's essential for building a sellable company, that independence of any one constituency. And the 3 most important groups you've got to make sure you are independent of are, number 1, customers. So you can't have an overly concentrated customer set. You've got to have good diversification among your customer set. Number 2, employees. So you can't be overly reliant on any one employee. And number 3, and this one's obviously not sometimes as intuitive as the others, you can't be overly dependent on any one supplier either. So customer, employee, supplier, you've got to be independent of those 3, because for a buyer coming in, they're going to look at your business, and if they see that you're overly dependent on any one of those constituencies, they're going to discount the business because it's just too risky for them. So to improve your score, you've really got to make sure you've got good diversification in your customers, make sure you're not overly reliant on any one employee, and you've got diversification in your suppliers as well. Remember when you were a kid, you go to the playground and you'd be on a teeter-totter. There's a light kid, and the heavier kid gets on, a light kid goes up. The same relationship exists between the way cash moves through your company and its value. And it's one of the drivers of sellability. Essentially, when a buyer comes and buys your business, they've actually got to write 2 checks. So they write a check to you, the owner, it's obvious. They have to write a second check that a lot of people don't really think about. And the second check is to fund your company's working capital. That's the money your business needs to operate the day you hand over the keys to the buyer. The deal is that the buyer has to write those 2 checks out of the same checkbook. So the more your company sucks up in the way of cash, the more cash your company needs to operate, the less they're going to be willing to buy your business. So the way to improve your score on the valuation teeter-totter is really to make sure that your business is generating cash. If you collect receivables, collect them faster. If you can extend your payables a little bit more, make sure you're delaying your payments to the point where you're just generating more cash as a business. And that's going to improve your score on the teeter-totter. When a buyer comes in to buy your business, they want to understand, okay, how's this business going to continue when you, the owner, leave? And so the more reoccurring revenue you can have, the more valuable it's going to be. And I found that there are really 6 different forms of reoccurring revenue, and buyers view each of the forms a little bit differently. I'm going to give you the 6, kind of like a David Letterman's top 10 list. I'll start from the lowest valuable one and end with the most valuable ones in the eyes of an acquirer. The first of the 6 forms of recurring revenue is simple consumables. So I'm a coffee drinker. I probably have 2 a day. So in the morning and usually after lunch, I've got a refill on coffee. So it's a simple consumables business. One step up the ladder is a sunk money consumable. So you've seen these Nespresso coffee makers where you've got the machine and then you buy the little capsules. That's called a sunk money subscription because you've sunk money into the machine. You're way more likely to buy the capsules from the same company. Next one up the ladder is subscription revenue. So if you've ever subscribed to a magazine, you know about that, right? There's a start date and an end date to your subscription, and the editors know that you're a subscriber for either a year or 2 years into the future. It's a form of recurring revenue. One step up the ladder is sunk money subscriptions, where you sink money into a platform. And then you buy information or something on a subscription basis. A good example of that would be the Bloomberg terminal. Wall Street traders have the hardware, the physical computer that sits on their desk. That's called the Bloomberg terminal. They also buy the information on a subscription basis. So it's kind of mashing together 2 of these concepts, not only sunk money consumables, but also buying on a subscription. Auto renewal is the next rung up the ladder, where instead of having a start and a stop date to a subscription, it's in perpetuity. So, when you store documents, for example, with a document storage company like Iron Mountain, that's in perpetuity. They keep the documents until you say, send them back or shred them. And they just keep billing you on, a continuum basis. That's auto renewal or evergreen. The most valuable form of recurring revenue is contract revenue, where a customer is contractually obligated to buy from you into the future. And that, of course, is the most rock solid form of recurring revenue. So to improve your score on this attribute, what you want to try to do is both walk up this hierarchy of recurring revenue. Think of it as a ladder, moving up the rungs on the ladder. So if you've got subscription revenue today, think about if you could turn that into auto renewal subscription, or if you've got evergreen subscription, could you make those contracts? Once you can climb up as high as you can, you really want to focus on the proportion of recurring revenue. The ideal is 100%. Very few businesses get there, but the higher proportion of recurring revenue and the higher up the ladder you go, the more valuable your company is going to be. So the monopoly control is an attribute of sellability that means you've got control over how you price your product. You're not being commoditized, essentially, because you're unique and different in the marketplace. You've heard Warren Buffett, the famous investor, talk about this idea of having a deep and wide moat around your business. He's referring to the idea that he invests in companies that have a differentiated marketing position. A lot of investors look for companies that have a differentiated proposition because that gives you ability to control your pricing. The more you control your pricing, the more margin you make. The more margin you make, the more you can invest in sales and marketing, and it triggers this nice little domino effect that enables you to stay different in the marketplace. Again, the more different you are, the more control over you have of your pricing. So the way you can improve your score on the monopoly control is to really scrutinize the way you're marketing your business through 2 lenses. Because a marketing strategy has to have 2 attributes. It's got to be meaningful to customers, and it's got to make you different. So scrutinizing all the messages you have in the marketplace, so look at your website, the side of your vans, however you communicate to your market, and say, does this make us different? And do customers care? Those are the 2 drivers that drive up your monopoly control score. Customer satisfaction is an obvious driver of sellability, right? So obviously, how satisfied are your customers is going to be important to a buyer. Because when a buyer buys a company, they're buying the future. So when you leave and ride off into the sunset, they're going to want to know, how's this business going to be performing when you're gone, the owner? To drive up your score on this attribute, you've got to really quantify empirically, quantitatively measure customer satisfaction. Probably the most well-liked, well-respected way to do that is something called the Net Promoter Score. You can Google it later, but essentially you're measuring and benchmarking your performance on the likelihood that your customers are going to recommend you. And the more you have that data, the more you'll know for your own peace of mind that your customers are satisfied, but the more acquirers will also be able to see that your customers are satisfied and likely to repurchase from you. Yeah, hub and spoke refers to how dependent your company is on you personally. Again, when an acquirer comes in to buy your business, they're going to want to know, how's this thing going to operate when you leave? And the more dependent the company is on you personally, the lower you're going to score on hub and spoke. You know, the name comes from 20 years ago. I was talking to a business owner and he was describing his role in the company. He said, I'm a hub in a hub and spoke model where all my employees come to me when they've got a question. My customers come to me when they need a quote. My suppliers come to me when they want me to buy something. And he was proud of that operating style, saying that, that's what makes his business efficient. Well, it may be efficient, but if you've ever flown through, Chicago O'Hare when there's a snowstorm and the hub breaks down, it gets locked up, it's a disaster. And so the same thing is true of a hub and spoke business owner. When everything is dependent on the hub and spoke or that hub manager, there's not much value left in the company. So the key here is to improve your score on hub and spoke is to make sure your business becomes less dependent on you personally. And one of the quick ways you can do that is to start documenting your processes, right? So if you have ways of doing things, get them down on paper. Make sure employees are aware of the 7 steps to close up at night or the 3 ways that we, change our brand or the things that are important to us as a company, our values and so forth. Make sure all this stuff is not just in your head, but expressed, written down so that employees can read it, digest it, and operate when you're not there. One of the fun ways you can measure how you're doing on hub and spoke is to take a vacation. Start small, take a couple days, and just see how your business operates when you're not there. Come back, find out where the breakdowns were, and start plugging those holes. Again, with training, process improvement, making sure things are documented for employees. Take another vacation, make it a week or 2, and again, see how the business performs, because it's at those points of where the business breaks down, you've got to reinforce before you're going to score better on hub and spoke.